we have Andres Vendemir coming to us from the University of Twente. And he's the president of the European Organ-on-Chip Society, and he's going to discuss his role in the standardization document for organ-on-chip that was just released by CEN-CENELEC. So, Andres, are you?
Yeah, I'm here, Graham. Thanks for
Yes.
that introduction.
Thank you.
Thanks. Hello, everybody. Good to see you virtually. And indeed, so I'm here to talk about this roadmap document that Monica already alluded to earlier in her presentation. And yeah, so I have to mention I'm from this community of organ-on-chip and microphysiological systems, and I am mostly an academic developer of microphysiological systems. And I have to admit that I have hardly ever met a community of people that is so passionate about standards. That is, I think, quite uncommon in typical scientific fields. But whenever I go to a meeting, whether that is the MPS World Summit or the European Organ-on-Chip Society annual meetings, and also our national meetings, we talk a lot about standards and how important they will be, both in driving more widespread implementation and adoption of organ-on-chip and microphysiological systems, as we heard, of course, this morning, mostly, of course, towards pharmaceutical preclinical development and regulatory testing, but also in enabling innovation, pre-competitive innovation. And basically, I think it's very, the belief is very widespread that we do not have enough standards in organ-on-chip, and that is hurting our reproducibility and robustness, comparability of results, and thereby implementation. But it's also hampering interoperability of different organ-on-chip components and systems. So if we can somehow get standardization, then it allows many stakeholders in the market, academic, commercial, to focus on their areas of expertise, whether those are, for example, generation of stem cell-derived tissues or generation of beautiful flow sensors. In the end, of course, an organ-on-chip device or a microphysiological system is an integrative whole, and you want to bring all these components together. And if we find ways to standardize aspects of those workflows, we, of course, can innovate a lot faster. So this need and that widespread, let's say, vibe was very clearly recognized in Europe. And Monica already said so. So there was a very strong effort from the European Commissions, particularly EURL ACFAM, the part that Monica is affiliated with, as well as the European Committees for Standardization, CEN and CENELEC, to establish an activity in this domain. So I'm going to go and very quickly acknowledge also the hard work that Monica put in and her team, of course, in organizing the workshop, putting science into standards, that led eventually to the establishment of the formal focus group for organ-on-chip. And for this focus group, I was, for slightly more than 2 years, I was the chair, and we established this in March 2022. And as said, it is a part, the focus group is, or was actually, it's the work now is done now that the roadmap is published, but it was part of CEN and CENELEC, so the European committees for standardization. And to briefly give you, let's say, I'll give you, let's say, the high level overview. What was the mission of this focus group? What were its main objectives? Then I'll just give you a very brief outline of the workflow that we took as a focus group, and then give you the high-level summary of what we recommended, and of course the link for you to download the roadmap, because for us that was the main deliverable. So we basically had, as a focus group, 2 important objectives. First of all, since we had identified this pressing need for standardization in organ-on-chip, we wanted to systematically plot the landscape of standards for organ-on-chip that were already publicly available. You can imagine that organs-on-chips, they are microfluidic devices. So Darwin just gave a number of very beautiful examples of existing standards in the domain of microfluidics already. Similarly, they are biological devices, so there are, of course, also standards to work on biological components, cells, biomaterials, etc. So a lot of stuff is already going on, and we wanted to systematically plot that landscape. And then based on this exploration of the landscape, we wanted to define a roadmap for key opportunities and priorities for future standardization efforts. So it's also good maybe to explicitly state that here. The goal of this focus group was not to draft standards per se. It was to identify where future standardization activities needed to take place. I gave you the main objectives, and also in view of time, of course, I don't want to go into too much depth, but I'll just outline very briefly the approach we took in trying to achieve this mission, those two objectives that I just provided. And what we did is that we worked our way sort of backwards to first, of course, identify the fact that every organ-on-chip microphysiological system typically has its application. And this application, of course, like can be in drug development, can be in toxicity testing, can be in evaluation of food products, etc. About this application, we can always identify there are opportunities to identify standards. And that's something that we acknowledged and that we looked into. Then in this, of course, has already been addressed a lot also this morning, that we have to then clearly define the context of use. And in the end, of course, what feeds into the defining that context of use and understanding that application is the data that typically comes then out of our organ-on-chip model. So, of course, it's clear that this is the language, the dialogue that is taking place. We as early organ-on-chip developers like to focus on making our microphysiological systems as a nice model of the human body or of aspects of the human body. But in the end, of course, for applications, what matters is what data comes out. And also there's a lot of opportunities, of course, to think about standardization or existing standardization, for example, in terms of data management or characterization of readouts, robustness, reproducibility, etc. And then central to this, of course, is then the organ-on-chip model. But as I mentioned very briefly already, they are explicitly, of course, integrative devices that bring components that are technical and components that are biological in nature together. And both of those aspects and components that I just mentioned also are amenable to standardization. So this is basically, of course, how we broke down the work in this focus group. And I should mention that we did this in a very diligent way. So Sen asked us also to do so. So we based that on the rules and guidelines as provided by Sen in the way of working. So being very inclusive, making sure we have all relevant experts on board, and that we always work in a consensus and transparent manner, consensus-driven and transparent manner. So I'm just going to go and map that back and basically say that what I just showed you, we translated that directly into the structure of the focus group. So we identified multiple working groups and divided the work for drafting, both doing this plotting of the landscape and drafting the roadmap with priorities and opportunities for standardization. So overall, this was an effort that took slightly more than 2 years, and it was a lot of work, and a lot of people contributed to this. And I basically included this slide to give you a flavor of that. So many meetings went into this, commenting periods, etc. But in the end, we very proudly published the roadmap earlier this year during the annual meeting of the European Organ-on-Chip Society in Milan. And the roadmap document is now also freely available. So feel free to download that, to share that amongst your colleagues, etc. So the QR code is here and will also be up in the last slide. So I just wanted to, like I said, I wanted to give you a flavor of the typical recommendations that came out of this work, all this work, and that are summarized in the roadmap document. So I'm not going to go and read all of this out loud, but it was clear that there is a very strong need, and this was also briefly, I think, already acknowledged by Darwin, terminology and definitions. And I think it was also Sonia this morning that mentioned this very clearly, that there sometimes is differences in opinion about what, or maybe confusion about what a certain term might mean. And of course, this is very important for us to just draft resources that harmonize that terminology in the field. Then secondly, we identified recommendations for minimum reporting requirements for both cells and biomaterials to be used in organ-on-chip systems, and particularly paying attention to functions and aspects that pertain to microphysiological systems and organs on chip. To develop standard documents to address key engineering aspects of organ-on-chip systems, and some of those were very nicely, I think, already mentioned just by Darwin, can be taken also from efforts that are ongoing and done together with organizations like the Microfluidics Association. Then specific requirements for experimental design, data management, and then of course, this is then important also towards working towards qualification, a major theme in the meeting, of course. And then overall, we also say that we would like to develop documentation that outlines specific requirements for the use of organ-on-chip devices in the various application domains. Of course, currently we're talking, like in this workshop, a lot about application in regulatory science, particularly when it comes to drug development. But of course, there are many other application domains, and they all come with different guidelines and requirements. So I'm going to go and basically share with you what was the overarching conclusion, because as said, we didn't do actual standardization, but we did identify strong needs and opportunities for standardization. And we also, over the past 2 years, identified very clearly that on an international level, both in America and in Asia, in addition to Europe, there's a very strong drive and many initiatives to actually work towards standards in organ-on-chip. And so we need also to make sure that we do this in an international platform. So what we are currently doing, and I think what is one of the outcomes of this focus group, was to propose also a home for all these standardization activities in the domain of MPS and organ-on-chip. And we have proposed recently the formation of a subcommittee in the ISO Technical Committee 276 for biotechnology. This proposal for the formation of a subcommittee for MPS and organ-on-chip is currently up for ballot, and we will hear what the members of this technical committee will say about this mid-October. So we'll keep you posted on this. With that, I want to wrap up and end here. So again, here's the QR code to downloading the roadmap. And of course, I'm the chair of the European Organ-on-Chip Society. So we also always, of course, will also share news and latest developments in this domain of standardization for organ-on-chip also on that platform. With that, I'd like to thank you and